Senator Rob Portman is a member of the Finance Committee. He joins us now with his reaction to the president's position on tax inversions. Senator, how are you? It's good to see you.
I'm doing good, Joe. How are you?
What are the chances that Congress or the House would pass a bill that would just close this loophole? Is it possible that that would happen?
Well, you can't really close a loophole because people are going to find, other ways to become foreign corporations, and it would be terrible tax policy, Joe. We got to reform the tax code. We got to get at the underlying problem.
There are people that think they can do it the other way, though. And what I just happened to do, and I hope Andrew is listening.
We tried that. We tried that a few years ago, and it didn't work. And it doesn't work because if you make it even more disadvantageous to be an American company, what's going to happen? You're going to see more companies become foreign companies. Maybe not through inversions, which I think is really only the tip of the iceberg.
Yeah.
Well, we'll look at it. I mean, there are all sorts of companies being acquired by foreign companies today. Try to buy an American beer right now. I mean, they're bought by foreign companies because the bottom line, after-tax profit, is better for these foreign companies, so they can afford to pay a premium. And that's what's going to happen, and it will accelerate if we even make it harder to be a U.S. company. We've got to get at the underlying problem. I heard the president's speech yesterday. He called these companies economic deserters. And, the problem is Washington. In a way, these companies are economic refugees. In other words, I don't think they want to leave the United States. I think what they're saying is, hey, I can't keep my fiduciary responsibility to my shareholders and be an American company anymore, which is incredibly sad because the American tax system is so non-competitive. The rate's too high, and the international system doesn't allow us to compete effectively. So we got to look at Washington, not call these companies names.
Yeah, Sorkin, I'm looking at, I don't ever expect to see this in the New York Times, and Senator Portman, I'll just reference this. The FT basically agrees with you, Andrew, that a company like Apple has benefited from U.S. innovation, the rule of law, other advantages of the American system to become globally dominant, but they didn't reach the top via philanthropy, and expecting them to change their act is quixotic. But the FT goes on to conclude that this won't fly. Just closing that loophole won't fly.
I don't disagree with you.
And the president, probably his advisors, they say, have argued you can't waste capital on a big tax reform because it won't happen. But this won't happen either. If you're going to try to do something, why not try for the grand bargain that actually solves the problem?
I don't disagree with you. Look, I think everybody wants corporate tax reform.
The FT actually comes to that conclusion that because all you'll do is have more lawyers finding more ways of getting around this loophole.
But I could make the argument. I could make the argument that President Obama is trying to drive a wedge in Washington right now so that we actually do get some form of corporate tax reform, given the fact that not only Republicans but many Democrats, and by the way, everybody really does want to get to some form of reform.
So you don't
but
think
then we sit around and say we can't get there.
You don't think this is, Senator Portman? To me, it looks like there's an November, and it's an easy position to take that the draft-dodging corporations are the bad guys. And Congress won't raise the minimum wage, and they won't close this loophole. What am I to do? Elect more Democrats in November.
Look, I hope the president's interview yesterday with Steve was accurate and that he is going to send a detailed tax proposal forward. He hasn't yet, and back in 2012 they sent a 25-page white paper from Treasury. That's great, but they have not engaged with us on corporate tax reform. I hope they will. As you know, because I've talked about this on this show for the last 3 years, this is not just an important problem, it is an urgent problem. And the people who are suffering are American workers, because when you have these high tax rates, based on all the economic analysis, including a Congressional Budget Office report, 70% of the harm goes to workers in terms of lower pay, lower benefits, and the ability to have a job. So this is an issue that ought to be something that the president leads on. I think it sounds like last night that he wants to start leading on it based on his interview with you guys. That's great. But it's not going to be solved by just doing these political one-offs where we make it even harder to be an American company. You mentioned Apple. They dragged Apple up here to the Hill, the Democrats, to give them a hard time about using creative tax planning, okay? And said, basically what the president said yesterday. They didn't use the word economic deserters. I think they used the word economic patriotism means you shouldn't go overseas. Well, listen, what we did in that hearing is we came forward and said, this is what Samsung pays. After all this creative tax planning by Apple, Samsung pays less. And so if you're Apple, what are you to do? And every other country in the world that is part of the OECD. All the developed countries have all reformed their tax code since 1984 when we last touched it.
So, Senator,
we're just sitting at the sidelines, and there's an opportunity here to do it.
Get into the nitty-gritty. We all want this country to be the most attractive place to do business. What does that mean the rate has to be for you?
It's got to be at least 25%. It'd be better to be lower because 25% is now the average. In fact, it's slightly above the average when you include the state taxes, because we're really at 39 now. But it's got to be at least a 25. And we have to have a tax system internationally that's a territorial type system. There are ways to do it. As we've talked about before on the show, I've drafted a proposal. I've had it scored by the Committee on Taxation up here, the Joint Tax Committee, to be revenue neutral. There's a way to get there. By the way, I've shared those details with the administration. I'm happy to share it with others. Frankly, the Democrats I talked to about it are interested up to a point, but they're looking for some cover and some support from the White House. So I think there's an opportunity here. Let's look at this as the opportunity to take advantage of a bad situation, these inversions, and actually do something to help the country move forward. And by the way, it also responds to the question that a lot of people have about why do some corporations in America not pay taxes or hardly any taxes? If you did this reform, everybody would be paying taxes.
Right.
Because you'd have fewer preferences, exemptions, credits, deductions, and, you know, so it's good for the country to reform this code, but it's also good for the American worker who right now is getting the short end of the stick.
Right. Senator, do you think you could carry Ohio in 2016? No, seriously, do you think you could?
Well, I'm up for re-election, so I hope so.
No, I don't mean that. I mean, how about Portman, Becky? I mean,
I love
don't put Becky on the spot.
And then, on social issues, you're on certain social issues, you're where I'm glad where you are, and because I think that it's not divisive, and you speak. You're kind of boring, maybe, but we could spruce you up a little bit. But you know what? I think
boring in a good way.
Right, in a good way. But I think the social issues might not allow you to appease the base.
No,
but you would be.
Hey, Joe.
I'm with
Where
Joe.
are you? I mean, we're back to we got two families in this country. Those are the only people that can run. I mean, I don't get it.
Here's where I am. The country's in trouble. We're in trouble because we are slipping behind, because we're not doing what we need to do on tax reform, as we talked about. But it's much bigger than that. It's about regulations. It's about what we do in terms of international trade, where we are sitting on the sidelines and the American workers getting hurt. It's about what we're doing in terms of health care costs dramatically increasing at a time when you already have a middle-class squeeze out there with wages going down. So, look, I think the country's in trouble. The debt and deficit's a real issue. I did a little comment on that this week and got a lot of grief from the right and the left saying, but why are you talking about the debt and deficit? I'm talking about it because it's at record levels and because it enables us as Americans over the next 30 years to add another $70 trillion to the debt. So these are big issues. And if we don't address them, I think the country's not going to be able to get back on its feet. And we're not going to be able to pass along to our kids and grandkids a better country. So that's what I'm focused on. I'm doing it in the Senate now, and I hope to continue to be able to do that.
Don't change the subject. Don't change this. So weren't you trade? What were you? You've done like 10 things in Washington, right? I mean, you got all this experience too, right?
Yeah, I can't keep a job.
Will you think about it? Not VP. Just think about it, because I don't know. Great state of Ohio. A lot of presidents have come from Ohio. You know that, right?
Yeah, you just got this Ohio bias, Joe. By the way, our Cincinnati Reds are having a tough time. If you can go and throw out the first pitch,
I just checked. They get to 1.5 games back from Milwaukee before the All-Star break. I go to one of the games against the Yankees. They get swept by the Yankees. They've lost 6 straight. They're 6 out of 6 back again, and it's like, why do I try? Why do I?
No, there's still room for a comeback. A lot of injuries. Got the Nats in town this weekend, so hopefully we'll do well against.
Or?
No, he's not. But
you jinxed him.
Yeah. I don't know. Hope springs eternal, my friend.
Senator, you made a lot of sense. The president yesterday said he was what does 4 square behind mean? He's 4 square behind doing this tax reform. So maybe.
Look, I think let's take him at his word and let's get busy on it. I think the American people are looking for leadership right now, and this is one area where they're seeing these companies go overseas. They don't like it. I don't like it. You don't like it. Let's do something about it that actually gets at the core of the problem, which is we've got a non-competitive tax code.
What drives me nuts is just the picking fights, pointing at fingers, and elections coming up, and these guys are this, and divide. It's all the same crap. I don't know if you're really going to see anything get introduced. I think it's looks like more posturing, and we have 5 years of it. But Senator, I appreciate it.
Thanks, Joe. Thanks, Becky. See you, Andrew.
Thank you.